Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be working on this akamatsu or Japanese red pine. The story behind this tree is that a few years ago I imported it from Japan and a customer subsequently bought it from me. I'll see if I have an image that I can overlay for you. But it was a lot more dense when I purchased it than what it looks like now. So what I've been doing is over the last few years have been reducing the amount of foliage or the number of branches by probably 2/3. I would say it's half of what it used to be. The danger of removing too much from a pine all in one go is that the sap might just recede and become unpredictable as to where it will continue to flow to. You may, if it's so severe and if you remove too much, then the tree may actually die. Obviously the tree is destined to be a bunjin or literati style tree. Bunjin is a very free style, and there isn't really a wrong or a right. It is more about it's either effective or emotive, or it's not. And very much part of being or eliciting that kind of response from the viewer is the trunk and the trunk line. So with bunjin, the focus is definitely going to be on the trunk. If you don't have a good trunk in bunjin, or if you have a boring trunk, then you're not going to have an effective or a pleasing bunjin style tree. I have heard that for a tree to be seriously considered for a prize in Japan for bunjin, that it needs to be over 100 years in age. Now, why that is because when a tree is of a certain age, the machikomi, the appearance of age, obviously that term refers to a lot more than just the appearance of age, but in this context of this discussion, very much referring to the bark character on the tree. So this is very important. On a young red pine, you wouldn't have this characteristic bark on the tree at all, but this tree is already quite old. So it has good character in that sense. And when it comes to trunk line, it has a very interesting trunk line. There isn't a tremendous amount of taper. You also don't want, in bunjin, you don't want to have a very fat, stocky trunk and then transitioning over a very short space or very short length of trunk into a very delicate, refined or thin trunk line. Now I'm going to jump into the tree and explain as I go along. It's always important when you're starting to style, or when you will be sitting down to style a tree for the first time, to find a front. This is standard bonsai practice, if I could call it that, and it obviously makes good sense because the tree is ideally going to be viewed from a specific angle. You need to identify the qualities in the tree that are the most that really makes this tree stand out, and it's those qualities that you need to try and enhance by positioning the tree in a certain way that really shows it off to best effect. So in this particular case, because we're styling bunjin, we're mostly going to be considering the angle of the tree to maximize the line of the trunk, the line of interest. Now, when you're doing that, obviously you can turn the tree in all directions, but don't forget as well that just because the tree is planted at a certain angle in the container when you're working on it, there's no reason why you can't alter that. And it's always very useful to have a couple of wooden blocks or something handy that you can position and then sit back or stand back and view the tree at a different angle to see if the tree is enhanced by changing that. And then of course, if you find a different angle, to secure the tree at that angle just remaining in the pot, but secure it at a different angle, work on it, and then at the next opportunity to repot, you would then repot the tree at that chosen angle. So this is is really the best angle or view of the trunk. I like the sweeping motion. If you look at the tree from the side, you will notice that when it was repotted, and when I did the repotting, it was planted in a very vertical fashion. But I actually think that it could be improved slightly by placing a block of wood behind it and elevating that a little bit forward. I think there is a little bit more interesting movement. The trunk is coming more towards you. I'm just going to secure it and then proceed with the wiring. So I've used a little piece of wire bent around, or to give me a sort of a U shape when it is perfectly aligned, and you can only see one wire, and that is the front. So that's the angle that I've chosen. Another characteristic that I admire in good bunjin trees is are delicate branches. When cultivating a Japanese red pine as a bunjin, you don't feed it or water it too aggressively. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to maintain a delicate branch structure. The other quality in bunjin style, which can be quite tricky, is your branch placement. So it isn't in a, let's call it classical sense, correct, but you are very much going to be looking at positive and negative spaces and creating interest by the positioning of the foliage pads. And even the pads will need to be looked at perhaps in a slightly different way. I have seen many bunjin that are quite bushy, where the volume of foliage is actually quite dense. My personal preference, though, is a tree that speaks more of a very harsh environment. This is where I have seen bunjin trees growing. So areas where they're very exposed to a lot of rain, a lot of snow, a lot of wind, a lot of sun. Those elements of nature will of course take their toll on the tree, and so you typically would find that those trees don't have very dense foliage. So they have a structure of a foliage pad, but it won't be too dense. So one has to avoid this the tendency of organizing the foliage pads too carefully. It's just my preferred visual styling or look of a bunjin tree is a more open, less refined foliage pad. And this in itself can be quite tricky. You would use wire to manipulate the branches into place, which is what I'm going to be doing today when styling this tree. But then once the wire is removed, the tree is allowed to, those branches might take on a little bit of their own positions and not returning back to the original position, but over time they will move. And so one needs to avoid the temptation to immediately go back in and rewire and position those branches perfectly again. And I think you would also limit the amount of wire that you're actually applying. So you're going to be applying wire to structural growth and secondary growth, but not necessarily, or probably avoid altogether, your tertiary. This is obviously where your growth points will be sitting. That will be left to develop or to grow in a position that kind of dictated by the tree itself. And this will give you that a little bit of added dynamic sort of feel, unpredictability, which is what I so appreciate about bunjin styling. I've now completed wiring the tree, and I'm very happy with the way that it turned out. It's actually taken a few years to get to this point. I've been putting off the styling, so it's very rewarding to actually see it now, my vision for it to be materialized. So I hope you've enjoyed the workshop and that you've picked up a few tips that you can use on your own pines. And if you haven't done so yet, please do subscribe, like the channel, and hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified when I upload the next video, which is usually on a Friday afternoon. So thanks very much for watching. Until next time, take care. Goodbye.